Hi there, Alan here with our weekly Monday night Discovering Buddhism class. Good to have you there. I hope you're well. For anyone new watching, I've got my name and the email in my email address. So if you'd like to join the group and receive the notes, just drop me an email. So this is our second class on how to meditate, and with two more to go, so halfway through. I sent out some notes today. Hopefully you got them. And we'll, as always, begin, I think, with our 5 minutes of mindfulness meditation, just watching the breath. And we'll also, at the end of the class, do a longer mindfulness meditation using the breath, and also we'll do sound awareness, and we'll do mindfulness of mental consciousness. We'll talk about that later. But for now, we'll just do very simple mindfulness of the breath practice. So get comfortable. You can be sitting, you could be lying down, and whatever's the most comfortable physical position. Eyes can be open or closed. The main thing is to be relaxed physically. If the body's relaxed, then the mind tends to follow. All right, so let's begin. And we also always start with brief motivation to get our mind in the right framework to listen to teachings and to study the Dharma. Let's start. Okay, we just start by bringing our attention into our inner world, have a sense of letting go of the busy day we've just had, the external world, the sensory world. A moment to reflect on how fortunate we are to come together to study the incredible teachings of Buddhism, to take care of our minds. Our motive is always not simply for studying the teachings of the Buddha for our own benefits, meditation for our own benefit, but for the benefit of those in our immediate world, those around us, and also ultimately for the benefit of those, all sentient beings, all living beings. That's the Mahayana motivation. Ultimately, we're proceeding on the path to full enlightenment, to reach Buddhahood, so that we can benefit all beings in the most beneficial way. Now, checking our body. Are we comfortable? The spine straight? The body evenly balanced on the floor or the chair? Just checking the upper body, the shoulders, the neck and the head. The muscles around the face and the eyes. Mouth closed with the tongue just touching the back of the top teeth. Eyes can be open or closed. Feeling the body touching the floor of the chair and the weight of the body. We can use the out-breath to breathe out any tension in the mind or body. Allowing ourselves to be held by the earth. Letting go. And then gradually giving more attention to the breath entering and leaving the body. That movement of the body with the breath. The rhythm of the breath in the body. Nothing to change. No right breath, no wrong breath. Just the breath. There will always be thoughts. But when we're focusing on the breath, we just let the thoughts come and go in the background. Our main focus is on the breath. But part of the mind is just checking, watching the breath. It's called introspection. Checking for when there's a distraction. When there's a distraction, we just identify it as a distraction. Could be a noise, could be a thought. And gently let it go, patiently come back to the breath. Okay, just relax. As always, you're welcome to always make a comment or ask a question in the chat column if you've got it there on the right hand side. And as always, we'll start with the questions. 3 questions there that I put at the top of the notes, just to sort of refresh what we did last week. First one is, how can meditation change our mental habits? Well, remember that our class last week, we talked about the impermanence of the mind. Just like the body is impermanent, the body, of course, we can recognize as impermanent easily because it ages and gets sick and eventually will have to leave the body at the time of death. So similarly, the mind will change from moment to moment. The mind is different to the body. It's non-physical, and it's without beginning or end. So one moment of mind causes the next moment of mind, this infinite chain of causes. So if mind is subject to causes and conditions, subject to causes, so we can sometimes feel that if we wake up a little bit grumpy, then that can affect the rest of the day. So our mind really is it's a bit like plasticine. It's got the potential to go in any direction that we train it. If we familiarize ourselves with a particular way of thinking, then over time that will allow us to develop new mental habits. So this is the whole point of studying the Dharma, meditating, and to see that this is possible to change the mind, and to, as much as possible, minimize the negative habits of mind and increase the positive. So this idea of familiarization, actually, that's what meditation, one of the meanings of meditation is to familiarize ourselves with an object. So that object, of course, doesn't have to be physical, it can be a particular way of thinking. So we can familiarize ourselves with loving kindness, generosity, patience, and this will develop a positive habit in the mind. So because of this, the mind is not some sort of concrete, fixed entity. This makes the whole possibility of developing the mind and just gradually eliminating the bad habits. Bad habits are defined as ones that cause us suffering and other suffering, cause us unhappiness, and developing good habits and finding out what those habits are. That's really what we study in this particular course. It's called the Lam Rim, the path to enlightenment, the graduated path to enlightenment. So with that, I think it's enough. Just a brief answer, because you've got the notes from last week. If you want to just review. Second one, what is placement or concentration meditation? So this is meditation that we've just done, where we just focus on one particular object. Nowadays it's called mindfulness. It can be called calm abiding, nice expression, abiding on one particular object, which is calming, very calming for the mind, to just rest the mind on one thing. And shamatha, the Sanskrit word, which is the state of being able to just focus the mind on one thing and rest the mind on one thing. So we're going to look in more detail at different types of calm abiding or concentration meditation tonight. And then we'll do a longer practice at the end using different types of concentration or placement meditation. And then remember, the other type of meditation is analytical, where we use the reasoning power of the mind. And this is also equally as important as the calming meditation. Meditation where we look at a particular aspect of the teachings and look at various arguments for and against a particular proposition, such as everything, all phenomena is impermanent, and look at the different reasonings used to establish that. This is what Buddhism's all about, not just accepting some sort of dogma, but actually using our human brain to check. The usual analogy is the goldsmith checking whether the gold is genuine, pure or not. This is what Buddha taught. He said, don't accept everything I say just because I'm the Buddha. You need to check within your own mind whether it's true or not. And you can see when you read teachings of Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the Dalai Lama, they're always emphasizing this important aspect of checking up with our own inner wisdom. So that's placement meditation. This is important, but it also needs to be put in the context of the other type, analytical, and also it needs to be put in the context of the whole of its Buddhist teachings. Placement, just focusing on calming the mind, which can be quite seductive because you can get very blissful experiences in the mindfulness meditation, placement meditation. And but we need to realize that this is just part of the whole picture of the Buddhist teachings, the Lam Rem. The last one, in addition to meditation, the practice of Buddhism involves two other activities. What are they? Okay, so I've already just hinted at that. So those three actions of body, speech, and mind. We hear, the hearing, contemplation, and meditation. So the hearing involves, could be listening to live teaching, could be reading. It involves also reading, hearing. And then we need to, that's getting the information. And then next thing is to think through what we've just heard or read. And this can sometimes be done when we're not formally sitting on a cushion or studying a book. It can be when we're doing something in the real world. We might see something in our everyday life that confirms some teaching that we heard. We look in the world at the moment, we can see that the pandemic confirms impermanence and how the body is subject to birth, aging, sickness, and death. And so that's contemplation. And then meditating is putting the mind on that particular truth or conclusion and leaving it there so that it becomes ingrained or part of, we can subsume it into our consciousness, that meditation on a particular point. So hearing, contemplation, meditation, these are the activities. Okay, I think that's enough of the questions, and always feel free to send me an email if you've got more questions. So just now moving on to the other types of concentration meditation. So we're still on the meditation that's called calm abiding or shamatha. And if you want to go deeper into shamatha or the study of calm abiding meditation, probably, and you like to listen to teachings, Alan Wallace's podcast, which I've listed on the course outline, which we got last week. There's actually a web link to the teachings he gave in Sydney on 2019. So I've actually just been brushing up on those and listening to them this week. They're really good. There's 7 days of teachings, and he actually starts with the most basic type of shamatha, calm abiding meditation, which is the breath, and then he gradually moves through to the more esoteric objects of using the mind itself as the object of meditation. And throughout the 7 days, there's 4 teachings a day, 4 sessions. 3 of them are Alan Marsh teaching, and the 4th one is one of his students teaching. Just one particular one, the first 3 days I found quite hard to listen to hear. The recording is not particularly clear for the first 3 days. It could be about halfway through the 3rd day that they improve. So anyway, that's just a word of warning if you find a little bit hard to hear the earlier teaching. But so each podcast is about an hour and a half, and within each of those hour and a half, there's one complete 24-minute guided meditation with Alan leading it, and he gives an introduction of about 20 minutes for what the meditation is, and then he gives a teaching after it as well. So highly recommend it if you'd like to listen to an expert on calm abiding meditation and with practice. So we've been using the breath up to now in our mindfulness meditation. Very easy, not very easy, but the technique is easy. Doing it is actually very difficult, but the actual theory is very simple. The mind is resting on one object, the coming and going of the breath, and at the same time, or now and again, the mind is checking to see whether we're still on the breath or not. So any physical object can be used. We can use sound awareness, what we hear. We'll do that. We'll use sound awareness tonight when we do the last meditation. So sound awareness, we're just linking into what we hear. Might be that there's nothing that we can actually hear if we're lucky and got a very quiet neighbourhood, quiet room, quiet house. But there will also be the sound of our breathing. There's always some sound. And as with all the objects, the breath, the sound, sight, we're trying to just observe the raw object, the raw sense, without commenting. Oh, that's an interesting. I'd like to know a bit more about that. Oh, that really annoying lawnmower next door. So that's sort of conversation and evaluation. We're just trying to, if we can't completely eliminate that and just hear the raw sound, just notice that if we have this voice coming in and liking or disliking something. So the thing is that we're not just being involved in identifying, being carried along with the story of the sound. We're just watching sound awareness. Just like the breath, no good breath, no bad breath. And so the sight awareness, we can open the eyes and just watch what's in front of us. Just raw visual input, what we see. What we see, let there be seen what we see without comment. We can use taste and smell, but usually they're not available because we're not usually eating or smelling something. So these physical sensory objects, any of them can be used. Also, more traditionally in Tibetan Buddhist meditation, this kind of shamatha, calm abiding meditation, they use the visualized object, and more traditionally is a picture of the Buddha or a visual image of the Buddha. So a holy object, or it could be a stupa. So this visualization meditation is probably the most commonly taught in traditional Tibetan teaching. And sometimes it's said that you can start off with a physical object, such as a statue of the Buddha, and just be watching that. But eventually we need to let go of the physical object and visualize and use that visual image as the object. The visual image is, in our mind, is the one that we rest our attention on. And it's said if we become very good at this visualization, the clarity of the visual image becomes much clearer than actually just watching the visual image. And so this visual image can usually be a holy object, but we can also just use a candle or a flower, particular object. So you will find more instructions on visualization in Kathleen McDonald's book, How to Meditate. She has quite a few guided meditations there on visualizing the Buddha, visualizing Tara, the female Buddha, and so on. So then we can also use a non-physical object, and this is usually called mental consciousness. So we can let go of all sensory perception and just watch what's happening in the mind. So this is more esoteric, a little bit harder to focus on something that's non-physical. But instead of in our sensory sensory mindfulness, such as the breath, thoughts are not welcome. Thoughts will be there, but we're just letting them pass through the mind. But in this one, mental consciousness, thoughts are welcome. So this is the object of our practice is mental consciousness. So anything that comes up in the mind, in the space of the mind, so it could be just thought of what we're going to do after this class, thought of what happened today, maybe a visual image flashes into the mind, conversation we had. So it could be something in memory, something we remember from recent past or distant past. It could be something just like a feeling, hungry, or it could be just feeling bored, feeling depressed. So whatever comes up, and it doesn't have to be, we don't censor the show, what comes into the mind. We're open to whatever comes into the mind. Or it could be an image that we might feel uncomfortable, image of somebody we don't like. Whatever it is, we allow it to come into the mind, and we allow it to pass back into the space of the mind. It comes out from the space of the mind and goes back into the space of the mind. So, but we don't, unlike when we're not doing mindfulness practice, where we're hooked in to the workings of the mind, when we're doing mindfulness of mental consciousness, we try and stay aware that this is a mental event. We don't identify with it. We don't enter the story and start liking or disliking the image of the enemy or the person we don't like, or getting interested in the plans that we're going to make for tomorrow, whatever. So watching the thoughts coming and going, but not identifying. A bit like, if occasionally quite hard to do, but if we're having a dream and we actually can be aware that we're dreaming, that's called lucid dreaming. So that actually gives us this distance and it disempowers the dream. This awareness that we're actually watching thoughts, only thoughts, they're not real, can take the energy out of the thoughts, and they will tend to evaporate back into the space of the mind. So Alan Wallace teaches this particular type of mindfulness meditation very well, round about day 5 in the 7-day podcast. So it's also something we'll briefly try at the end of the class tonight, mindfulness of mental consciousness. So then this link to that particular mindfulness of mental events is the space of the mind itself. Sometimes if we're watching thoughts coming into the mind, there may be no thoughts coming. There might be a space. So that itself can be used as an object of our mindfulness practice, the calm, quiet stillness of the empty mind, the space of the mind. A bit like what in the movies, there's nothing on the screen for some reason, the power fails and we're left with a blank screen. So the performance that's happening the movie suddenly goes blank, TV goes off, and we just live with a blank screen. So the space of the mind, the awareness of being aware, the stillness of the aware mind. So that's another possibility. And then the last one, the mindfulness of the mind itself. So those previous objects, the sensory objects, the consciousness events, mental events happening in the mind, or the space of the mind itself, they're using an object, so we're using a particular object. But when we get to this last kind, meditation without an object, we're actually turning our attention on the actual mind itself, the mind that is being used to watch the objects, a bit like the camera watching itself. So this type of meditation is sometimes called meditation without a sign, and the word sign is just referring to whether you have an object to watch or not. And the previous types, where we use the breath, etc., they're meditation with a sign. So in your readings, your extracts, Lama Yeshe's article called Meditation on the Mind Itself is the one that covers this part of the topic very well. Lama Yeshe has a very wonderful gift of describing complex teachings and concepts very simply. So we won't go into that in great detail because we won't have time, but that article is there, and I've actually summarized it very briefly, top of page 2, where he actually guides the reader through a meditation. Mind is the object. It's sometimes called Mahamudra meditation. And so I've just put some points, dash points there at the top of page 2, which highlight some of the guidance that Lama Yeshe gives on this particular meditation. Also, Alan Wallace gives a very good teaching on meditation on the mind itself in around about day 6 of the podcast, that I just mentioned, excuse me. So I'm getting the usual signal which comes about saying my connection is unstable. So hopefully you can still see and hear me, or at least hear me. I'll continue on. So we're on page 2, halfway down. There's a heading there saying 9 stages of calm abiding. So this meditation, calm abiding, can be practiced as a particular formal, intensive practice to actually attain what's called shamatha, where the practitioner, if they're very well qualified and they've got the most perfect conditions, perfect conditions means that they're in a very quiet place, they have somebody to provide all their food, they're in a very clean, pure environment, and they also have the background, which was often called merit, the mental preparation to just practice nothing but mindfulness meditation. And by intensively practicing mindfulness meditation and nothing but for a period, usually it's a number of 3 months, I think it is, or 3 to 6, depends on the individual, then it's possible, passing through those 9 stages, to actually calm the mind to such an extent that the mind can be placed on any object for as long as the practitioner wishes. That's deep shamatha meditation. It's said that practitioners attained samadhi. So just if you attend a more intense practice, such as an Alan Marsh retreat, he won't be going through the 9 stages, but he'll discuss that in more detail. And you might, on page 3, there's an illustration which is often used when discussing the 9 stages of tranquil abiding, calm abiding. And those pictures show, by using an elephant as the elephant mind, our mind, untrained mind, a monk that's trying to, which is ourselves trying to calm the mind, and a monkey, which is a distraction, leading the mind astray. So without going through the 9 stages in detail, if you just have a look at those stages of first of all, the elephant is painted black, and the elephant mind, the untrained mind, the unsubdued mind, is actually leading the practitioner. So this is when we start off, stage 1, and the distraction is leading the mind astray up the path, and the poor old monk is running behind it, trying to sort of calm and trying to control the mind. So that first stage, probably, if I'm on a good day, I'm at that very first stage, where you can actually just leave the mind on the object, the breath, just for a brief time. But all you're doing is just trying to put the mind on the object, to find the object, whether it's the breath, the consciousness, or whatever. And then as the practitioner practices more and more mindfulness over weeks, months, or years, the elephant mind gradually calms down. As you can see, halfway up, the elephant is becoming from a black, uncontrolled elephant mind to the white part of the elephant. Gradually, the white of the elephant represents control of the mind. And gradually, the practitioner, rather than running behind the uncontrolled mind, which is led by the monkey, eventually, you can see halfway up, the practitioner is actually in front of the elephant mind, which is halfway calmed down, and the distraction is actually on top of the elephant. So the practitioner is able to actually lead the mind. This is where the practitioner has more control of the mind than the mind, the elephant, uncontrolled mind. And gradually, the practitioner can lead the power of the elephant mind. And you can see the picture towards the top where the practitioner and the elephant are both sitting down. So that's where the practitioner has practiced successfully calm abiding meditation, so that the mind is subdued, controlled, and all kinds of distraction and dullness, so excitement and dullness, the 2 main obstacles to our practice of calm abiding, and what's called subtle distraction, subtle excitement and sinking have been subdued. And then once that 9th stage is reached, placement with equanimity, then the practitioner needs to do more practice to familiarize his mind with the control that he's exerted, and then he can get on top of the elephant mind. He's actually guiding the mind itself, and he's reached what's called pliancy, the physical feeling. The body reaches this kind of joy, ecstasy, a feeling of great bliss arises when the practitioner has control of complete control of the mind. Now, this is not Buddhahood, so just obtaining shamatha, control in excellent concentration, might sound like something that we should put at the front of our practice, but in fact, the teachers and the teachings say this is a tool, and it's not the full path to enlightenment. It's just something that is very useful, but it needs to be taken in the context of the whole of the Buddhist teachings. And Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe, if you read their teachings, they often make a bit of fun of people, students who have a kind of obsession of reaching perfect shamatha. And they say that in past lives, when we've been practicing and meditating, we've actually obtained this state of samatha, control of the mind, perfect concentration, many times in our past life, but we haven't become enlightened. So unless this skill is combined with wisdom and compassion, the other parts, the other wings of the teaching, Mahayana Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist teaching, then it's not going to actually solve our problems. It's not going to take us to enlightenment. So we usually start teachings, whatever kind they are, with some mindfulness practice at the beginning, and then we use the other type of meditation, analytical reasoning meditation, to study the Dharma. We use the listening and the analysing and reasoning, as well as the meditation. So this, I think I've mentioned before that mindfulness meditation in itself is neutral. It's said to be a neutral practice. It's not in itself virtuous, but we can make it virtuous by setting a virtuous motivation. And we do the practice to benefit other beings. It's basically a virtuous motivation. But Lama Zopa often jokingly says we can mindfully rob a bank. We can mindfully do some very negative action using perfect concentration. So if we don't use that skill, that very sharp mind in a good way, it may not even be benefit, might be harmful for us. Anyway, so that's enough of that. Then on page 4, there's a little bit there about 9-round breathing practice. So the 9-round breathing practice is part of quite a high tantric practice called the inner fire meditation. So 9-round breathing practice often is taught very much by Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa as a good practice to do at the beginning of teachings or at the beginning of our mindfulness practice. And when you read the transcript by Kathleen MacDonald, she spends quite a bit of time describing how to do the mindfulness practice and its benefits. So we'll actually do the practice once when we do the meditation at the end of the class. So I'll just describe it very briefly. Very simple. What we do is breathe 3 times in through the right nostril, out through the left, and 3 times in through the left nostril, out through the right, and then 3 times in through both nostrils, out through both nostrils. Now, we can just visualize this in our mind, or we can actually use the index finger of the right hand to block the nostril we're not using. So I just did 3 times in through the right nostril, out through the left. So the 3 times in through left, right, out through left, 3 times in through left, out through right, and 3 times in through both, that makes 9. So even though you might think it doesn't really do anything, surprisingly, it has a very powerful effect, and it can actually be a really good calming introduction to breathing meditation or doing some other object in our concentration meditation. Now, the optional visualization is to imagine when we're breathing in through one nostril, out through the other, is that we're breathing white light with the in-breath, and that white light is all the positive energy of the universe. And then when we breathe out, we visualize that as black smoke. And that's breathing out all our distractions, negativities, and obstacles to our practice. So we can, that's optional visualization. So if you want to just get a bit more detail on the practice, page 23 of Sangye Kadro's transcript, Sangye Kadro being Kathleen MacDonald, the author of How to Meditate, the book How to Meditate. She's an excellent teacher. So let's now look at the obstacles and how to fix them in meditation. So the two most common obstacles are distractions and dullness. That's really means that the distractions means that there's too much activity in the mind. It's too excited. So it's often called mental excitement, and too many thoughts. So it could also mean being distracted by outside noises or pain in the body. So something physical. So this is being too scattered. And the opposite is where the mind is sinking, dullness or sinking, where rather than sort of too much thoughts in the mind, it's actually going sleepy, going to sleep, and there's not enough energy in the mind. So these are the two main obstacles, and they're the ones that we need to check when we're doing any mindfulness practice. And you'll probably know which one you're more prone to be victim of. Going to sleep every time you try to watch the breath, or having some sort of thoughts come in. This is my personal problem, is too much activity, too distractions. Sometimes it could be dullness, sleepiness. So it can depend on the day or the time of day when you're doing the practice. So let's have a look at distractions. And this is what our mind is probably doing most of the day when we're just we're not actually doing any formal practice, we're not actually consciously watching our mind. The mind is actually going from one thing. Being distracted could be by what we're doing externally, or it could be just when we're working. We could have to move from one task to another quite quickly. But if we notice that the mind is distracted, the power of that distracting thought is somehow miraculously diffused. It loses its power. Just noticing that we have been distracted from the object, from the breath, just noticing that is usually enough for the distraction to sink back into the mind, if it's a thought. So when we first start to do breathing mindfulness practice, and actually I have to say even years later when I'm still trying to do mindfulness practice, it's when you start watching the mind rather than just being in the outside world, it seems like the mind is being more distracted. There's more thoughts coming into the mind. And this is usually because we're not as aware of what's happening in our mind when we're in the everyday world, because we've got sensory sights, sounds, and so on. But when we sit down and actually start looking at our own mind, what's going on in that, we actually see the amount of traffic that's there. Just like when we're driving on the freeway and all we see is the car in front and behind, but as soon as we pull over and watch the passing traffic, we realise that there's thousands and thousands of cars going past. And so this is This is what we tend to be doing when we first start watching the thoughts, because we're suddenly putting our mind into the job of watching the traffic, watching mental thoughts. There's no more traffic than there was before, but we're now, because we've stepped back, we're now able to watch what's happening on the screen rather than being involved in the movie, the performance. So by seeing, this is alertness or introspection. So we start off deciding on what our object is. We just, for the moment, assume we're watching the breath, and then part of the mind is watching very carefully. This is alertness, introspection, to actually see when we stop, when we get distracted from the breath. And the sooner we notice that, the better we're doing the practice. So those thoughts will be there, and if we are just like a security guard watching for the intruder to come in and take our mind off the breath, when we notice that, just by seeing the thought will disappear back into the space of the mind. And I think I mentioned the analogy that Alan Wallace uses, like the cat watching the mouse hole, waiting for the mouse to come out of the hole in the wall. The mouse will be there, and if the cat and the mouse make eye contact and see, the mouse will stay back, run back into its hole. It won't come out. That's quite a vivid analogy of this mind, this watching mind, the thoughts coming up, ready to take our focus off the object, and then the watchful cat of mindfulness, just by seeing the mouse will run back into the hole. So it doesn't always work that way. The mouse could be out running all around the room before we actually realise it, and then we need to. So this is just how long it takes. So when we notice the thought for the first time, it's always going to be after the thought arises. But this is always explained, that we're always a little bit behind the fact that the thought itself. The thought will come, and then we're, in retrospect, noticing the thought. Alan Marsh explains how this works in great detail. So how to help with these distracting thoughts? The physical suggestions are to, if you're in a bright room, to darken the room, maybe turn the lights off or pull the curtains. The other suggestion is to, if you've got your eyes open, to gently close them or partially close them. And another suggestion is to use when we're focusing on the breath, to lower the focus to the abdomen rather than the nostrils. So the other way is suggestions, and there are many, is to count the breaths up to 10. I don't think I've put that in the notes, but counting the breaths from 1, at the end of each in-breath, we count 1. And we try to see if we can get up to 10 without being distracted. And if we get distracted before we reach 10, just go back to 1 again. The important thing with counting the breath is to count the breath, but not just the numbers. If you start counting, this is what I tend to do. If I'm counting the breath, I tend to fairly quickly go to just counting numbers. I lose the breath, I'm just counting 1, 2, 3, and so on. So it doesn't work for me, but for many people, I know it does work to count the breath. And sometimes counting the breath can work to bring the mind back to the breath, and then you can just forget the counting and just stay on the breath. It can be just used as a tool temporarily. The other thing is to label the thoughts. So just observe what that distraction was long enough to identify it. Observe that thought. It could be some problem we've been thinking about. It could be some plan we're making. It could be some person who is bothering us. So just looking at that content long enough to give it a name, and give it a name, planning, or remembering, or worrying. Usually just one word's enough, and that can somehow, by seeing what it is, giving it a label, make it easier to just put it back into where it came from, back into that space of the mind. Came from the mind, goes back into the mind. These are thoughts. They're just thoughts. So they're not real. As Alan Marsh constantly emphasizes, that by just seeing these thoughts as thoughts, no matter whether they're good thoughts, bad thoughts, frightening thoughts, they're thoughts. And by just recognizing as such, and not hooking, saying, this is me, the thought is me. It's not, it's a thought. It's not me, it's a thought. So that's similarly to when you're in a nightmare, having a dream, and you're lucky enough to be able to see that it's just a nightmare. It can actually take all the power out of the fear out of the nightmare, and you can actually change the story. Okay, well, that monster that's chasing me is no longer powerful. It's only I don't have to actually worry about it. I can actually just stop and look back at the monster and disappear. So so these just looking at some of those other suggestions. Lama Yeshe's wonderful quote saying, if you try and stop the thought, it won't work. It's like just putting a lid on a boiling pot of water and pressing down on the lid to try and stop it boiling. So that's not going to stop it boiling. But if you remove the lid, the pot from the fire being the energy of those distracting thoughts, then the source of heat is taken away, and the distractions lose all their power. But that's taking it off. The heat is just identifying the thought as thought, using that mindfulness. It's a thought. Just more practical things there about noise. If it's an external noise, I had a leaf blower for about half of the afternoon this afternoon outside my house. So I was trying to just make that leaf blowing noise, just watch it to see what my reaction is. Quite a lot of dislike going on, quite a lot of, why can't he use a quieter, all these, why does it have to be now, why doesn't he just use a broom, all these different things. So you can notice that. And so just by the fact that you're noticing the judgmental mind, the I'm being annoyed, and that can help diffuse the power of that noise. The other one is to just welcome the noise and just take it in as just to hear that noise, even though it's annoying, as raw sound, without the big story about how awful it is and how it's affecting my day. Just to see noise as noise, sound as sound. Or very good practical advice, get noise cancelling headphones, which can be very good. They can work. But yeah, practical advice. So these various different recommendations, there are lots more recommendations or advice as to how to deal with distractions. In Sange Kadro's commentary, she talks about it in more detail. And the thoughts themselves can be, if the thoughts are so frequent, we can change the object to the thoughts themselves and make those thoughts the object of meditation. So thoughts are welcome. And just by welcoming the thoughts and waiting for them to come, then strangely they'll get shy and there may be no thoughts coming. That's one of the effects of making thoughts the object. So that's one possibility, which we'll try when we do the meditation using thoughts as the object. Next one, dullness. So this is the opposite when things we tend to doze off. So physical advice, first of all, straighten the spine. We tend to doze off. So physical advice, first of all, straighten the spine. Just check our posture. Remember, whether we're sitting or lying down, we're supposed not a ramrod spine, but a comfortably straight spine. And we also need to check our balance, whether we're evenly balanced on the cushion or evenly balanced weight if we're lying down. If you are lying down, it might be good to try sitting, because sometimes, Alan Wallace says if you go to sleep when you're lying down, that's okay because you need the sleep. Go to sleep and then come back when you've had the sleep and try again, because you would have refreshed your mind. Other people connect lying down with being asleep, and so it's very difficult to do the lying down posture. So it depends on the person. So one possibility is to just try the sitting up position. Let more light in. So this could, if your eyes are closed, you're practicing with your eyes closed, just let some light in by opening them, and also have some light coming into the room, more fresh air coming into the room. So other possibilities are to remember how beneficial mindfulness practice is, having a calm mind. And we might have had some good experience in our mindfulness practice in the past, which we can bring to mind, that feeling of control and peace. And we can also do a more analytical meditation, thinking how fortunate we are to be tuned to meditate. Our cats and dogs can't do it, animals can't do it. So many other beings who are spending their whole life working to stay alive can't do it. Others don't have any interest in doing any meditation. So we can use this reasoning to remind ourselves of this incredible opportunity of having the human body. Reasoning to remind ourselves of this incredible opportunity of having the human body with the human brain. And connected to that is the death awareness meditation, where how long are we going to have the human body with the human brain? It's the death awareness meditation, where how long are we going to have the human body with the human brain? This could end at any moment. Death is certain. Time of death is completely uncertain. And the thing that will help at the time of death is our mind, how much we've developed our mindfulness and our positive mental qualities. Other ways are just to forget about mindfulness practice. Maybe listen to a teaching or teacher who we're familiar with. Read a book. I find I just love Lama Zopa's teaching and Lama Yeshe's teaching, and if I'm reading, you just open a book of theirs at random and just read some of their teaching. I can feel my mind becoming more attuned to doing some practice. Other suggestions are to just forget about mindfulness meditation, go for a walk, get some fresh air, which we can do even in the pandemic, can exercise. Look at the sky, go to a place where there's a horizon, if we've got that opportunity, and to avoid doing a meditation straight after lunch, because that's usually connected with very sort of sleepy time of the day. So if you ever do a retreat, you'll notice that they usually have quite a long lunch break from, say, 12 to 2 or 3, so that time straight after lunch we can spend doing something more mundane things, because it is quite a difficult time sometimes to focus the mind. Okay, so they're just a few random suggestions. There's some others as well. Now, the motivation, just briefly touch on that. All our meditations in our Mahayana Buddhist practice should begin with a positive motivation. In our Mahayana Buddhist practice should begin with a positive motivation. Positive motivation will be usually the best one is I'm doing this practice so I can calm my mind, I can have less anger, less impatience, less distraction, and by doing that I can benefit those around me in my immediate life, and I can benefit others in the long term. So that's a virtuous motivation, doing the practice to benefit others. For a complete Mahayana, full Mahayana motivation, we're doing it so that we travel the path to becoming an enlightened being, perfect power of mind. So an enlightened being has unlimited power to benefit others in each, as each one requires, each individual sentient being requires the Mahayana motivation. Okay, so I think we'll start. So we're going to do a mindfulness practice now, using starting with the breath. Well, actually, we'll start with the 9-round breathing, which I've just described, and then we'll go into breathing meditation, using the breath as the object, and then maybe we'll do 5 minutes breathing, and then we turn our mind. We change the object to sound meditation, what we hear. So it's still using the senses, but we're using sound awareness. But sound awareness could be close sound in the room. It could be distant sound outside the room. It could be sound within the body. And then the last one, we use the mind itself, what's happening in the mind. So mental consciousness is where we welcome the thoughts coming into the mind, but only we welcome them as an uninterested bystander, someone who's just watching without any particular interest in what comes into the mind, and not holding on to, not identifying, not liking or disliking, but allowing the thoughts to come into the mind and allowing them to leave the mind. So mental consciousness, thoughts, feelings, memories, even emotions, more subtle. So that's that's meditation. So I'll guide meditation for most of the time. We'll do 5 minutes of each of those objects, and then I'll do a dedication. Okay, so just get comfortable, and we'll do our meditation. Excuse me, Mr. All right, so now we begin our mindfulness practice by starting with our 9-round breathing practice. The 9-round breathing practice, breathe in 3 times through the right nostril, 3 times out through the left, 3 times in through the left, out through the right, and 3 times in through both, out through both. You can either visualize that or just use the right index finger to block the nostril we're not using. Okay? Beginning 3 times in through the right, out through the left. Three times in through the left, out through the right. And then 3 times in through. And And then 3 times in through both, out through both nostrils. And back to normal breathing. Now we start our breathing meditation, but we begin by just checking our motivation. We're doing our practice without any expectation, accepting our mind as we find it. Doing our practice not just for our own benefit, but benefit of all beings. We just check the body to make sure we're comfortable. Watching for any tightness in the chest or the shoulders. Using the out-breath to breathe out any tension, physical or mental. Are we evenly balanced on the floor or the chair? Just bring our attention now to the rhythm of the breath, the movement of the breath in the body. Watching, nothing to change. Staying with the breath. Part of the mind is checking now and again where our mind is. Is it on the breath? Has it been distracted? Can we do one full in and out breath without distraction? When we notice a distraction, be happy we've actually noticed the distraction. That's introspection. We can just gently let go of that distraction, perhaps label it, and come back to the breath. Patiently, again and again. the option of counting the breath, experimenting with that. And then gently changing the object of meditation from the breath to sound awareness, what we hear. Sounds inside the room, outside the room, sounds inside the body, sound of the breath. Just what we hear. Nothing to judge, nothing to change. Let there be just awareness of what we hear. Occasionally just checking in to see whether we are still on sound awareness, or have we been distracted by thought. Coming back to sound awareness. In this realm of sound, let there be just what we hear. then gently letting go of sound awareness, letting go of all sensory awareness. And now our object is the mind itself, what's happening in the mind. Thoughts are welcome. Images, memories, emotions, feelings. Allow them to enter the mind. But don't attach, don't identify. Just allow the thought to be the thought and go back into the mind, the space of the mind. If there's no thought, watch the space of the mind, the experience of no thoughts. Stay with that until there's a thought. Experiment with labeling the thoughts as they arise and letting them go back into the space of the mind. Any uneasiness, instability, come back to the breath awareness. And finally, we can just end the meditation by dedicating an any positive energy, merit, mental imprint from this practice, from today's teaching, all the practices we've done in the past, we'll do in the future, towards our development of stable mind, peaceful mind. And for stable, peaceful mind, using that to progress gradually on the path to full liberation, full control of the mind, full enlightenment, to become fully beneficial for all beings as an enlightened being. And just to reading Lama Zopa's special dedication for the pandemic. However many sick sentient beings there are, may they quickly be freed from all sickness. May all the sickness without exception of all transmigrating beings in the world never occur again. May the Buddha Dharma last for a long time. May sentient beings in this world meet the Buddha Dharma and achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible. Dedicated to that. Okay, that's it for tonight. Thanks so much for being there. Great to have you there, and have a good night, a good week, and I look forward to seeing you online next week at the same time. Take care and stay well.